Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. As we engage in this world and interact with various people within this world, there are times in which we have situations where people wrong us and perhaps are mistreating us, maybe speaking evil of us, abusing us in some way. And these are times in which we seek vindication. We want someone to step in and enact justice. And Psalm 26 helps us to understand how to go about that, how to go about seeking justice and vindication. And the very first verse really gives us the first uh, thing that we can learn about this when he says, "Vindicate me, O Lord." Here the psalmist is taking it to the Lord. And that's the first thing we must remember. Whenever we're in a situation where perhaps people are wronging us, they're mistreating us in some way, that we don't enact justice on our own, but that we seek the Lord and we ask him to vindicate us. And this is consistent with what we find in Romans chapter 12, where it says in verse 18, if possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Never take your own revenge, beloved, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. But if your enemy is hungry, feed him, and if he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And we'll see some of those elements in those other verses as we go through Psalm 26. But what we want to focus on now is that idea of don't take your own revenge. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. I will repay. And so here the psalmist gives us a good example of what to do in that he's trusting in the Lord to vindicate him. And that's very significant. But there are other things that we can glean from this psalm in connection to times in which we have a similar situation as David did here, where people were acting in a very evil and wicked way towards him. And one of the main things that you can glean from Psalm 26 is that if you want to be vindicated and your enemies swept away, or, just taken care of in one way or the other, be sure you're not standing where they are. There he talks about in verse 9, do not take my soul away along with sinners, nor my life with men of bloodshed. There in the context of him seeking vindication. And the idea is that if you don't want to be swept away with the evildoers, this is implied, then don't be standing where they are. He said in verse 12, my foot stands on a level place. In the congregation I shall bless the Lord. So here the psalmist says, sweep them away, but I'm going to be standing on a level place. And so that's our point of application here, is that if you want vindication, if you want justice, if you want God to sweep away your enemies, whatever that might mean practically for you, don't stand where they are. Don't be where they are. In other words, don't imitate them and don't put into practice the things that they are doing. As we would put it in our vernacular, don't sink to their level. These people that the psalmist is talking about were engaged in various activities. In verse 4, they were engaged in lies. It says, I do not sit with deceitful men. It talks about their hypocrisy. It says, nor will I go with pretenders, or hypocrites, we could say. He says, I hate the assembly of evildoers, so they're involved in evil. He says, and I will not sit with the wicked. So they were involved in wickedness as well, is implied there. But in all these cases, he's showing a separation from them. I do not sit, nor will I go. I hate the assembly of evildoers, and I will not sit. He's saying, I'm going to separate myself from the wicked people. I'm not going to participate in what they are engaging in. As a matter of fact, he was going to act in an opposite way. As you continue on in verse 6, we see what he was going to do. He says, I shall wash my hands in innocence. So he's going to wash his hands in innocence. Secondly, he was going to go to the altar of the Lord. It says there in the latter part of verse 6, and I will go about your altar, O Lord. So he was going to seek God and the protection of God in connection to the altar. And then he was going to proclaim thanksgiving in verse 7, that I may proclaim with the voice of thanksgiving. So he's going to the tabernacle, to the altar, to the place where worship takes place, and he's going to offer up thanksgiving. And then lastly, he says, I'm going to declare all your wonders. He's going to tell of God's good deeds. And so this is contrasted with what the evil people were doing. He's not going to sit with the deceitful men or go with the pretenders. He hates the assembly of the evildoers. He will not sit with the wicked. But what he's going to do is wash his hands, or go to the altar. He's going to proclaim thanksgivings to God and tell the good deeds of God. And that's important for us to remember. When we are seeking justice and vindication, in that time in which we're waiting on the Lord to act, it can be very tempting for us to try to enact justice on our own. And typically when we try to do that, we begin to engage in the same activities that our enemies are engaging in. We begin perhaps to tell lies, or begin to be deceitful, or begin to engage in hypocrisy, or engaging in evil deeds, or begin to slander, or things. The list could go on. But oftentimes when we're waiting for justice and perhaps we think it's not coming soon enough, we want to step into that and begin to act like they do, but then still at the same time want them to be swept away for their sins and for their evil doing and wrongdoing, but us be spared. And of course, that's not a fair way to look at it. If you're engaged in the same deeds as they are engaged in, then you can be expected, or you should be expected, to be swept away with them if you're engaged in the same activities. But what we want to do is we want to keep our actions spotless. We want to walk with integrity, with trust in the Lord, to walk in love towards our enemies, to not repay evil for evil, but to repay good and blessing to those who curse us and want to persecute us and mistreat us. We want to stay in the right. That way, if justice does come, it'll go to the right place, and we won't be swept away with them. Again, however that might look practically. So these are some things we can reflect on in Psalm 26. If we find ourselves being mistreated, the last thing we want to do is then begin mistreating other people. Just take it to the Lord, trust in Him, continue to engage in the spiritual disciplines, continue to seek the Lord, continue to be innocent in the situation, keep a pure heart, keep a pure mind, pure motives, and just trust in the Lord. And then at the right time, the Lord will bring vindication, because He says, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. So whether that happens as soon as we want it to or not, we know that the Lord in one way or another will make it right. So these are some things we can think about and reflect on as we do our reading today. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.